You are joining us for an exhaustive textual analysis of the post-Armistice of Mudros period in Turkey. We are bypassing our usual introductions today because the academic scope of this deep dive requires immediate focus. Our specific aim is to examine a widespread political and intellectual tendency detailed in the source text, namely, the active pursuit of British protection, or British Mandate, during the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
Right, and to establish the textual framework right away, the core thesis of the provided historical text is quite specific. The text argues that this inclination toward pro-Britishness, or what is termed Ingelicilic, was not an isolated phenomenon. I mean, it wasn't restricted merely to the Ottoman palace or known collaborationist circles.
Yes.
The document provides evidence that this ideology deeply permeated the nationalist movement itself.
And as a methodological note for you, the listener, we are going to rely strictly on the provided text. We will be maintaining an objective academic tone throughout this discussion to dissect the geopolitical maneuvers, the diplomatic proposals, and the internal correspondences that are detailed in the source material. We will not be applying external commentary.
Exactly. We are strictly analyzing what the documents say.
Yeah.
So, looking at the first section regarding the palace's submission, the text details Sultan Vahdettin and the Istanbul government's active pursuit of British forgiveness.
It does, and the text cites a specific interview to illustrate this. On November 24th, 1918, Sultan Vahdettin gave an interview to the Daily Mail. The document notes that in this interview, he claimed an inherited love for Britain.
Right, he specifically attributed this to his father, Sultan Abdülmecid, and cited the Crimean War Alliance as the historical basis for this affection.
And the text links this sentiment directly to his actions during the signing of the Armistice of Mudros. The source quotes Vahdettin stating that his hopes were tied to God, then Britain.
Yes, and he sent a corresponding message to his Grand Vizier, Izzet Pasha. The text outlines that despite the incredibly heavy terms of the armistice, Vahdettin assured Izzet Pasha that the British centuries-old friendship won't change.
Which the text then uses to explain his subsequent signing of the Treaty of Sèvres. The author describes Sèvres as Turkey's death warrant, but notes that Vahdettin signed it specifically in hopes of securing future British aid.
Furthermore, the text details a specific constitutional plan. Vahdettin intended to amend the constitution to appoint a British guardian for his son's future reign, and the document names Admiral de Robeck as the intended guardian.
That is a highly specific administrative detail. And the text points out that Crown Prince Abdülmecid Efendi utilized similar rhetoric. The source material indicates he offered the religious power of the caliph to ensure peace within the empire, explicitly for British interests.
Right. And moving to the executive level, the text details how Grand Vizier Damat Ferit relied on his personal connections. The document states he told the High Commissioner, Admiral Calthorpe, that he would appeal directly to King George V, leaning on his personal friendship with the former British king.
So, based on the text, let's unpack the exact terms of the mandate proposals. The source mentions two drafts, one from March 30, 1919, and another from September 8, 1919, drafted by Ferit and Vahdettin.
And it is important to note, the text explicitly states that Admiral Webb rejected this proposal. But the document details all 7 points of the draft.
Let's go through those points as they are listed in the material. First, it proposed a 15-year British occupation of necessary lands.
Second, the establishment of an Armenian Republic based strictly on British wishes.
Third, the destruction of Straits fortifications.
Fourth, the placement of British undersecretaries within Ottoman ministries.
Right. Fifth, the text notes the proposal required British consuls to act as advisors to provincial governors.
Sixth, the British would supervise all elections.
And finally, the seventh point detailed in the text is the surrender of total financial control to the British.
It's a comprehensive list of concessions. To illustrate the specific ideological commitment to British rule over any other, the text provides an anecdote regarding the Sultanate Shirazi, the Sultanate Council.
Yes, the text mentions a journalist, Rauf Ahmet Bey, who caused an uproar by mentioning American protection. The document states this uproar was led by Damat Ferit himself.
But the crucial detail in the text is that when Rauf Ahmet Bey corrected his phrasing to an American mandate, Ferit showed no reaction whatsoever.
Which the author uses to illustrate that the objection was not to foreign control, but specifically an adherence to a mandate framework, ideally British. So evaluating the text further, how does the source analyze Vahdettin's later propositions in August 1920 and March 1922?
Well, the text highlights his offer to put the Straits and the Turkish Gendarmerie under direct British command. The document states his stated goal was to prove to the Islamic world that Britain was the protector of the caliphate.
which transitions into the text's analysis of Vedettin's ideological stance on the nationalist movement itself. The source outlines his dialogues with Sir Horace Rumbold across March 1921, April 1922, and August 1922.
According to the text, in these dialogues, Vedettin claimed the Ankara leaders had no real ties to Turkey. He specifically described Mustafa Kemal as a Macedonian revolutionary of uncertain origin.
Right. The text lists the origins. Vedettin suggested Bulgarian, Serb, or Greek.
Yes, and the document outlines his further argument to Rumbold, that the nationalists were merely a revived version of the Union and Progress Party, or Etihad Veteraki.
The text states Vedettin accused them of holding 90% of the population hostage under a nationalist mask.
And crucially, the text notes he highlighted their alignment with the Bolsheviks, arguing to the British that this alliance was fundamentally incompatible with Islam.
So the text presents a clear ideological opposition strategy. The document then moves to detail the historical account of Vedettin's end. It states he fled on a British battleship.
Yes, and the text specifically notes his stay in Malta at the Royal Artillery Officers' Mess. The author includes the precise detail that this stay cost the British Parliament £100 a week.
Which is an interesting archival inclusion. The text also brings in an anecdote via the historian Lord Kinross. It notes a telegram from an American impresario to the British Embassy.
Right, offering to hire the deposed Sultan's wives for the New York Hippodrome.
Yes. And there is a significant footnote in the text regarding a later request from Vedettin. The document states he asked Ataturk for financial help.
And the text details Ataturk's refusal, citing the poverty of the state and the orphans left by the war.
How does the text synthesize Ataturk's evaluation of the palace based on these events?
The author presents Ataturk's conclusion that the national war naturally threatened the medieval monarchical system. Therefore, the text argues, the Sultan was structurally forced to become an enemy of the resistance and seek survival through total submission to imperialism.
And the text uses Damat Ferit's fate as the ultimate example of this imperialist pragmatism. Used to sign Sèvres, forced to resign due to unpopularity, and dying in Nice.
Exactly. Now, moving to the third section of the text, the author reviews the stances of other Istanbul governments to show this wasn't isolated.
Right. It looks at the collaborationist governments and the intellectual capitulation. For example, Ahmet Ezet Pasha. The text cites his directive to Raufur Bey at Mudros to seek British protection.
And the text notes Rault's message to Lord Curzon, stating Turkey could be a loyal ally.
Then there is Tevfik Pasha. The document quotes his foreign minister claiming that everyone's wish is to be ruled by Britain.
Even Ali Reza Pasha's government, which the text notes was ostensibly closer to the nationalists, is documented as submitting a memo to the Allies, stating they were ready to accept a mandate.
The text then examines the intellectual climate surrounding these political moves. It uses an anecdote from Fali Rifki Atay about the poet Yahya Kemal.
Yes, the text states Yahya Kemal wished the British would take the country entirely so they could be like Egypt.
While, according to the document, Ferit wished to be like Iran.
The author also breaks down an August 7, 1919, article by Ali Kemal in the Sabah newspaper.
What are the specifics of that article as presented in the text?
The text notes that Ali Kemal explicitly argued that surviving the war required handing over key administrative sectors to British guidance, specifically the police, justice, finance, and public works.
So how does the source material explain how this fear of the British permeated even the pro-nationalist intellectuals? It references a specific meeting, right?
Yes, the text details a meeting at the Akşam newspaper. It notes that Ismet Inonu and other figures were present, and they decided to wire Mustafa Kemal.
And the text explicitly states the content of that wire was an urge not to provoke the British or create a new hero in Anatolia.
Exactly. The text uses this to introduce Ataturk's taxonomy of the Istanbul governments.
Right. The document outlines two types identified by Ataturk.
The first is the Damat Ferit type, which the text defines as active collaboration.
And the second is the Tevfik Pasha type. The text defines this as passive resistance to the national movement while simultaneously signing documents of servitude.
Moving to Section 4, the text provides a detailed analysis of the Hurriyet ve Eplaf Party, or the Liberty and Entente Party.
The document directly contrasts its ideology with that of Etihad Veteraki, Union and Progress.
Strictly according to the text, the Unionists were defined as anti-imperialist, secular, modernizing, and centralist.
Whereas the text defines Hurriyet ve Etilaf as collaborationist, pro-capitulations, anti-westernization, pro-Sharia, and pro-decentralization.
The source then lists the specific actions taken by this party, It notes that Shaykhul Islam Mustafa Sabri wrote a fatwa to kill the nationalists.
The text also attributes the organization of the Konya and Yozgat rebellions directly to the party's leaders.
And it details the Endeludoderi, or Anatolia Society, which the text states proposed a Greek-allied sultanate government in Bursa to fight the Kemalists.
Then the text examines a very specific organization, the Angeles Mohipleri Chimieti, the Society of the Friends of England.
According to the document, this was founded in coordination with the British Embassy, specifically naming Ryan and General Deeds.
The text also lists the key figures involved: Reverend Frew, Saint Molla, Vedettin, and Ferret.
To illustrate the mechanics of this society, the text notes that Saint Molla gathered over 50,000 signatures.
Yes, and the document includes the detail that members received red ID cards featuring both British and Turkish flags. The text states these were used to intimidate police and tax collectors.
The author then unpacks the British strategy regarding the society, citing Lord Curzon.
What does the text say Curzon's actual strategy was?
The text notes Curzon stated Britain did not actually want a mandate over Turkey, as their intention was to partition it.
Oh, I see.
Yes. The document argues the British used the society to break internal resistance and force the acceptance of harsh peace terms.
The text supports this by analyzing underground letters from Saint Molla to Reverend Frew.
Right, dated October and November 1919. The text outlines that these letters coordinated Kurdish rebellions, media suppression, and the staging of attacks to justify crushing the national forces.
Which brings us to the fifth section of the text, introducing the concept of indirect pro-Britishness within the nationalist ranks themselves.
The document argues this was driven by a traditional fear of Russia, summarizing the logic as Russia is the enemy, so Britain is a friend.
The text details several examples of this. First, it cites Rauf Orbey's memoirs.
Yes, the text notes Orbey boasted that he proposed a Caucasian federation against the Bolsheviks to the British at Mudros.
And the document contrasts this with Ataturk's textual warning that such a move would reduce Turks to colonial soldiers bleeding for the Entente.
The text then examines the actions of Bekir Sami, identified as the first foreign minister.
The document details an unauthorized proposal he made in March 1921 to Lloyd George, again for a Caucasian federation.
And the text highlights a specific historical maneuver here. It states Lloyd George leaked this proposal to the Soviet foreign minister, Chicherin, specifically to break Turkish-Soviet relations.
The author also brings in Dr. Reznur's textual account of Bekir Sami's actions in Moscow.
According to this account and the text, Sami abandoned his national duties to demand independence for the Ossetians, aiming to become Prince Kanduk.
The text even claims he offered Van to the Armenians in exchange for support, and later traveled to Tiflis to try and form an anti-Russian coalition with France.
However, the text critically evaluates Dr. Reznur's own account, pointing out his hypocrisy based on archival records from Lausanne.
Right. Despite his condemnation of Bekir Sami, the text details that Reznur himself made an offer to Lord Curzon at Lausanne.
The document specifies he offered to make Turkey Britain's free gendarmerie in the Middle East.
The text also states he offered to drop Russian friendship instantly, and even proposed seizing Syria from the French to give to the British.
Moving to the final substantive section, the text links this diplomatic posture to military compromises and a wave of defeatism.
Yes, it details Ali Fuad Pasha's conversation with British Representative Mr. Hodgson in Moscow.
The text notes he argued that Turks are the only real barrier protecting British colonies from northern Russian invaders.
The document also outlines Rifat Bell's 1921 talks with Major Henry.
According to the text, Rifat proposed a strict alliance, joint control of the Straits, and a return to pre-1908 traditional British friendship.
And the author directly contrasts this with Ataturk's telegram from the same period, which the text notes demanded full independence.
The text then turns to Fevzi Çakmak's initial role as war minister in Istanbul.
The document states he ordered commanders to obey the British and referred to the national forces as vagabonds.
The text adds the specific detail that he only fled to Anatolia when faced with exile to Malta.
All of this evidence is used by the text to discuss the defeatism, or defeatism, that swept Ankara after the 1921 London Conference.
The text attributes the fueling of this defeatism to İzzet and Salih Pashas, stating their aim was to abandon the National Pact and accept Sèvres-like conditions.
So how does the text describe Ataturk's management of this internal ideological friction?
The document notes that Ataturk sometimes had to issue falsely optimistic reports about British neutrality to maintain troop morale.
The text provides the example of Ataturk claiming the British withdrew from Mersifon voluntarily rather than for tactical reasons.
Finally, the text analyzes the climax of this defeatism. It details Rauf Orbey's push in late 1921 to abandon the war for a political surrender.
And the text aligns this with the Allied armistice trap of 1922.
The author describes how Ataturk spent what the text calls his most fearful days touring military camps.
The document states his purpose was to convince commanders who had been convinced by the defeatists in Istanbul and Ankara that the Turkish army could not attack, that the armistice was a trick, and the great offensive was possible.
Which brings us to the underlying implication of the entire source text.
Right. Based on this exhaustive reading, the text suggests a profound conclusion for you to consider. The Turkish War of Independence, as presented in these documents, was not merely a military conflict against occupying armies.
According to the text, it was a severe internal ideological struggle against a deeply ingrained psychology of dependency.
The source material indicates that the hardest battles were fought in conference rooms and parliamentary halls against the assumption that the nation could not exist without imperial patronage. It leaves the reader to ponder the sheer difficulty of a state surviving when its own highest-ranking diplomats and generals are detailed in the archives as actively trying to negotiate their way into another empire's geopolitical strategy.